Having said that, let's move on to another big global issue, which is the Great Reset. As I said, this has been quite topical of late. There's a lot of different theories swirling around. Some of them are verging on conspiratorial, but it's important to address it because it is real. It's not actually, the existence of it is not a conspiracy. Time magazine is running a Great Reset issue. The World Economic Forum is calling its next national annual meeting the Great Reset, and they've put out a paper called the Great Reset. It's very, very real. It's an actual thing, and it has meaning for all of us because it's got great influence at the area of global governance with world leaders and so on. But to understand the Great Reset, you first need to have some understanding of the World Economic Forum, or the WEF. This is a body, it's just an organization, a not-for-profit. It's based in Geneva in Switzerland. It was founded by a bloke called Klaus Schwab in 1971, and basically in a nutshell, it is a think tank. It's a think tank kind of on steroids though. A think tank is kind of an organization that produces research, and they put together research papers on areas that are relevant to government policy. So it might be research on tax rates and the impact it has on business, or it could be on, I don't know, the nature, how many trees are in a suburb and what that does to happiness of the community or whatever. It could be any number of things. And they could put this research paper together, do all this original work, prove the whole bunch of things like a 20% tax rate is ideal, or 7 trees per square meter is ideal, or whatever. There'd be a lot of trees, but all that kind of stuff. And they go to government and say, here's our recommendations, here's our research. Some of these think tanks are quite influential and they can really influence government policy through the work that they do. The World Economic Forum is a bit like that, except that it's kind of enormous. It is global, for one thing, and also it's managed to get real influence with a lot of global figures, mostly world leaders, but also global business leaders, also figures like Prince Charles, Greta Thunberg, all these types, and a lot of celebrity types and everything as well. So it's quite a broad church, so to speak, and it brings all these people together at what they call these annual meetings. The annual meetings, in its own words, quote, bring together top leaders and shape global, regional and industry agendas. All that kind of blah, blah, blah wording is pretty common in everything that they write. It's boring. But in January 2020 of this year, about 3,000 of these so-called top leaders attended. They were mostly business people and they were mostly world leaders, politicians. It's influential enough to have informed political campaigns. So the phrase "Build Back Better," which was Joe Biden's, one of Joe Biden's slogans for the US presidency, is actually a phrase that comes out of the World Economic Forum and the work they've been doing. It was also used by Boris Johnson, the same 3 words in some of his work. Also, you can see the slogan appear on a lot of government department letterheads and communications they put out in research papers everywhere from Canada to Pakistan, the OECD. Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, made public statements using that Great Reset phrase and a few associated phrases. So it's a think tank with lots and lots of high-profile friends and very influential. It influences governments, it influences businesses, and it influences the way all these people think because they get together and talk about this stuff and go away and do their own thing, and it's all lodged in their head. That brings me to the Great Reset. What exactly is it? Well, it's actually a project of the World Economic Forum. It is the title, as I said, of their next annual meeting in May 2021. It is also produced in a big document. It's full of many words that make, that are boring reading, and a lot of them are buzzwords and generalized and all the rest of it. And it's just frankly excruciating. But some of the buzzwords it includes are things like change and transformation. It's always on about change and transformation. It wants to really change things. It wants to see that change and transformation in every country and every industry. So it's quite radical. And it wants to see that change and transformation shaped and brought on by the recovery from COVID-19 to reimagine economic systems and reimagine capitalism, as we shall see in just a moment. It's full of lots of PC stuff. There's lots of stuff about equality and sustainability, really heavy on climate change, really heavy. And also there's LGBT inclusion and all that stuff as well. Importantly, this is not just a document that is, or even a body, the World Economic Forum, that's all about governments. It's also all about the biggest businesses as well. It brings them into the agenda. And it does that by saying, oh, businesses aren't just about business. Businesses are actually all about, making a better world. And businesses are all about politics. And businesses are all about leaving legacies and changing society. And we've seen that a lot in businesses lately, mostly with them becoming more and more woke and enforcing diversity and inclusion agendas. And you see like Rugby Australia sacking Israel Folau, and you see Qantas with all of their games that they play. We're seeing this a lot in business. Well, the World Economic Forum is inviting businesses into the fold and saying this is business and government, and we're all into this thing of making a better world. That's significant because we're about to see the World Economic Forum supports stuff that traditionally businesses would not embrace, but they've cleverly included business in the agenda. So that's very clever on their part. Now, all of that's very general. But there are times when people like Mr. Schwab himself, Klaus Schwab, are a lot clearer about their meaning, and they really distill what they want, and you can get a sense of what they really mean with a bit more clarity and a bit fewer words. One example is October the 22nd, Time magazine, an article by Klaus Schwab himself summarising a lot of his work and much of what the Great Reset stands for. And I'm going to just read some quotes and make comment. He says this, for example, he says, a better economy is possible, but we need to reimagine capitalism to do it. What he really means is pitch out capitalism and put something in its place, but reimagine is a little bit more acceptable and genteel in the diplomatic world. He goes on to say the same economic system that created so much prosperity in the golden age of American capitalism in the 1950s and 1960s is now creating inequality and climate change. So in other words, capitalism's no longer any good. It was great, but no longer any good. And he says, and the same political system, so not economic system, but now political system that enabled our global progress and democracy after World War II now contributes to societal discord and discontent. Each was well-intended, but had unintended negative consequences. So short version, capitalism's bad now, democracy's bad now. Both of them are broken, both of them need resetting, both of them need fixing. You can get a sense of where this is going. He says crazy things like evidence that democracy is now splintered and messed up is things like Black Lives Matter and the climate justice movement, which is insane because these things have not been birthed from belief in democracy or any of the ideals of democracy. These things have been set up as an antithesis to democracy. They're revolutionary movements that don't believe in democracy or don't believe in Western values or any of these things at all. And they've been set up and they're causing all this trouble. He's like, yeah, see what democracy does? See all the trouble it causes? No, these are anti-democratic movements. And you see this a lot. It's almost like a kind of gaslighting. For example, with Biden and the Democrats coming in and saying, now's the time for healing. We're all going to, heal America. We're going to have peace and quiet like we couldn't have under Donald Trump because of all the division and the anger. And we know that the movements that were causing the violence when Donald Trump is still president, but, in the Trump term over the last few years, we know that they're left-wing movements. We know that it's Black Lives Matter that was doing that. We know that it's Antifa that was doing that. It wasn't, Trump following, Texans that were doing that. It just wasn't. But see, there's the kind of gaslighting here. It's like, oh, well, now we can heal because that was his fault when it was them all along. Anyway, that's a slight tangent, but it's becoming more and more common. So Klaus Schwab is up the creek on that stuff, but nonetheless, that's his point. He says, capitalism's got to change, democracy's got to change. He goes on, there are reasons to believe a better economic system is possible and that it could be just around the corner. He goes on to say two reasons for that. COVID-19, here's a great reset opportunity. Here's a new economic system we can bring in. Now's the chance, since we've botched our economies effectively, and maybe we can do something different now to hide that. The other thing he actually uses a lot, and that the World Economic Forum uses a lot, is climate change. Climate change as another sort of crisis, so to speak, to precipitate a massive reinvention of these systems. He goes on, for the past 30 to 50 years, the neoliberalist ideology has increasingly prevailed in large parts of the world. This approach centres on the notion that the market knows best, that the business of business is business, and that the government should refrain from setting clear rules for the functioning of markets. Those dogmatic beliefs have proved wrong, but fortunately we are not destined to follow them. Yeah, really? Okay. I would say that a lot of the debt trouble that Western countries are in right now isn't because of markets, but it's because of government interventions like coronavirus. Seriously. But anyway, notice how he's saying that businesses, he's bringing them into the political realm. The business of business is no longer business, but something far greater. Join us, be part of this program. That's really significant. And here's the other thing. He says these things have been proved wrong. The reality is that the last, since World War II, if you look at the democratic and the capitalistic systems of the world and how that's spread into more and more countries, the reality is that it has lifted more people out of poverty than at any other time in history. It has elevated more into the middle class than at any other time in history. It has raised up the lives of more people. It has improved the lot of more people than any other move or idea in all of history. And actually, when you do that, you get all the other things that Mr. Klaus says that he wants. You get, for example, far less emissions per capita with the technological advancement and with the change from a country from third world to developing to first world. You get all sorts of benefits. And he says, no, we don't want those benefits through the capitalistic tradition. We've got a better idea. That's important to note. Here's something far more telling. A video was released by the World Economic Forum, since deleted, interestingly, based on the notion of imagining life in 2030. It's a short video with a number of taglines. The first tagline that appears on the screen, and indeed the thumbnail of the video, was, "You'll own nothing and you'll be happy." Now here's a question. Who exactly is you? Who's owning nothing? I'll tell you this, it isn't Klaus. I'll tell you this, it's not the World Economic Forum. I'll tell you this, it's not the big businesses and big governments that are involved in the World Economic Forum. Oh no, but it's you. It's the little guy. You own nothing because someone is going to own something. That is pure communism, with an elite ruling class that oversees all things, and the little guy owns nothing and is meant to be happy. Doesn't work that way in practice. Great idea. The next line is, whatever you want, you will rent. And it makes my point. Who are you renting it from? Who are you paying? I thought we all own nothing. Someone owns the things. Someone made the things. Someone replaces the things. Someone is responsible for the things. It's just not you. It continues. The US won't be the world's leading superpower. In other words, and it goes on to say, it will be a coalition of nations. So it will be a multinational government. That's what will dominate. Right. As if that could possibly go wrong. And again, if America's not the superpower, I mean, what, do we want China to be the superpower? Do we think that'll go well? I mean, this is sort of the world government stuff. It's idealism. It says you'll eat much less meat, an occasional treat, not a staple. So in other words, someone is now telling me what I can eat. Someone's now telling people what kind of meat they can grow and how they can distribute it, and they're controlling food production, supply, and what you put into your mouth. Surprise. I guess if you don't own anything and you're dependent on the government who owns everything to rent stuff from, why not let them define what your diet is? It goes on, 1 billion people will be displaced by climate change. We'll have to do a better job at welcoming and integrating refugees. Okay, the first part of that statement, false. 1 billion people will not be displaced by climate change. But even if climate change was happening of that nature, there's plenty of work been done to show that the best way to deal with it is technological advance, and actually have the technology to deal with it. People can live anywhere with the right technology. People can handle anything with the right technology. And it's technological advance that will do it. But no, they say instead we're going to have to welcome and integrate refugees. And what this is based on effectively, and frankly a lot of countries do a great job welcoming and integrating refugees. They just do it in a sustainable way. But of course this is based on the idea that all cultures are a relativistic view of culture. That there's no culture that's better than another. There's no values that are better than others. No country has gotten further ahead because of its values and its culture, which are good. And therefore, to dilute that doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It is to, and you'll go on to see that they don't believe in Western values. And so that's really what they're after. They want the Western world to be overwhelmed by cultures from the developing world quickly so that they no longer exist. It says polluters will have to pay to emit carbon dioxide. There will be a global price on carbon. Again, I say levied by whom? Who gets the carbon price? Well, not you, because you don't own anything. No, the carbon price will go to the people who own the stuff, and they'll get fatter and they'll get richer. And at whose expense will that be? Yours, who doesn't own anything. Because that's what happens. The carbon price filters down to everything else. It increases the prices of everything. They actually say this: Western values will have been tested to the breaking point, which goes in with what Klaus was saying before about the fact that Western values, democracy, capitalism and all that are on the way out. They no longer work. What are Western values? Well, do you know, it's interesting. Western values, at the very least, are freedoms. Freedom of movement, freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, freedom to protest, that sort of thing. At least people agree on that. Okay, so freedoms. I'll tell you what else people basically agree on is that Christianity, or a form of it, is universally considered to be a Western value. But that'll have been tested to breaking point. Old hat now. Who needs the freedoms? Who needs the Christianity? New system. Well, finally, let me read quickly a couple of quotes from an article published by the World Economic Forum, How Life Could Change in My City by the Year 2030. This is hair-raising. It says, "Welcome to the year 2030. Welcome to my city, or should I say our city. I don't own anything. I don't own a car. I don't own a house. I don't own any appliances or clothes. It might seem odd to you, but it makes perfect sense for us in this city. Everything you considered a product has now become a service. We have access to transportation, accommodation, food, and all the things we need in our daily lives. One by one, all these things became free, so it ended up not making sense for us to own much." Now again, someone created that stuff. Someone has power over that stuff. Someone takes the rent for that stuff, as it said in the last list. Someone developed it. Someone repairs it. It's just that you don't own it. You don't own it. Someone's getting rich off it. Once in a while, and note this is how it closes. Once in a while, I get annoyed about the fact that I have no real privacy. Nowhere I can go and not be registered. I know that somewhere, everything I do, think, and dream of is recorded. I just hope that nobody will use it against me. I mean, that's just 1984 out in the open. It's not even hidden. So you're going to be tracked. Everything you think, everything you dream of, everywhere you go will be registered. You will be... So I wasn't wrong, was I, when I said, oh, it's just you that won't own it. It's just that you that pays all the money. It's just you that has your life controlled to the point of whether you can eat your meat or not. It's just you now that is tracked and watched and followed. This is pure communism. Notice, all in all, it's a good life, much better than the path we were on, where it became so clear that we could not continue with the same model of growth. We had all these terrible things happening: lifestyle diseases, climate change, the refugee crisis, environmental degradation, completely congested cities, water pollution, air pollution, social unrest and employment. We lost way too many people before we realised that we could do things differently. It's utopian. It'll solve the fact that there's countries in the world from which people want to flee because of war. We're going to end wars. Have you heard that before? We're going to have world peace. There's going to be no refugee movements. We're going to get rid of diseases. I mean, for heaven's sake. We're going to get rid of climate change, as if that's within our power. I mean, it's utopian, communistic. Now, here's the thing. Is this a conspiracy theory? I don't know. I mean, I should say just no. I was going to say I don't think it is, and then I said no, and it sounded like I said I don't know. That's not what I meant. I don't think it is. It's a real idea by a real bloke and a real entity. The problem is that entity happens to be sort of the hobnobbing place of many world leaders and business leaders, and these ideas are going to be rubbing off on them. Now, I hope that our government has the good sense to resist this. I don't have a lot of confidence, because the thing is, there's not many Donald Trumps in the world who are not part of this establishment class who have to pander to their friends in the political world, right? That have to be seen to pay credence to this stuff because their future and their politics and their lives depend on it. Trump was a true outsider, and that's why they didn't like him. We don't have many of those figures. And this shows us how these people at the very top in these global institutions, how they are thinking. They actually are Marxists and or communists and or something a little bit like both of those things, whatever word you want to give it, centralized government people. They are that kind of person. This is what they believe. They believe in the power of themselves and their own ideas to make a utopia that puts people into a position of total control. Total being controlled, that is. And here's the thing. COVID-19 has shown that the West will embrace this, at least at first. In exchange for a sense of safety and security, and for handouts from the government, and for the odd footy match where we have state of origin with 50,000, and yet we can't even go to a church with all of our friends at church, not allowed to do that, but a 50,000 footy match is fine. For that, we will give up most things. We will give up our movement. We will give up our work. We will give up our Western freedoms like protesting and assembly. We will give up connection with our family. We will give up everything because the government will keep us safe. Isn't that precisely what they want? No wonder Klaus Schwab has written a book, COVID-19 and the Great Reset. Because this, he says, is exactly what we want. And that was what we did for a disease with a 99.9-something% survival rate for young people and a high 90% survival rate for old people. As if it was the Black Death and we're all going to die. Give away a lot, don't we? Quickly, easily. People will drink this up at first. But as the old saying goes, you only vote for communism once. And by the way, COVID-19 was one thing. The next they'll try and engineer into a crisis to get more of this agenda off the ground will be climate change. And it's very clear in the Great Reset documentation that's precisely what they want to do. And that really is, I think, the threat posed by this, is the influence of this group, the World Economic Forum, and the way people are primed to accept it. You know, I was asked very recently at a public forum what I believe is the biggest threat in the next decade or two which we're largely unaware of. That was the question I was asked. It was actually at a forum in Alice Springs. And I thought about it, and I didn't want to give an answer because it sounds crazy. But I said then, communism. And I have thought that for a while, but I haven't really said it, because if you take people too far ahead of where they are, they switch off and don't listen to you. But that is what I believe. It's already happening institutionally in many changes to legislation. In many changes around crises like COVID-19, the response is communistic. Or maybe there's a more precise word, but communistic is close. It's already happening radically in movements like Black Lives Matter. We're trained Marxists, they said. They're revolutionary. They want to wreck the joint. They're total, this is how they think. Or Extinction Rebellion, or Occupy Wall Street, or Safe Schools, or any number of others. And there'll be more in the future. It's already happening mentally, by capturing the minds of young people in the education system. If you teach them Marxist and communistic concepts in the curriculum for long enough, they will embrace it when it arrives. I know more than one young person who's recently finished Year 12 who proudly announces that they are Marxists. And it was purely, I can tell you, because of their education. And that's here in Australia. But of course, it has to happen, doesn't it, when you remove God? Where else do people go for contentment, for security, for purpose, for everything of that nature? If there is no higher authority than the state, and with starry eyes and with their misplaced hopes, they will start looking to the state to make them happy. It won't last because it'll prove false, but that's where people are starting to look. But there is something more than the state. There is something more than politics. The destiny of all things, ultimate meaning, are found in none other than the living God. Utopia is not on this earth. Utopia is in the next life and the next world. And I am so glad that there's something more than politics. I'm so glad that Trump or Biden or whoever my favorite candidate is winning the presidency is not what my happiness, my security, my joy, and all that sort of stuff, that's not what it depends on. Never has, never will. Because there's something far greater than Trump, there's something far greater than Biden, there's something far greater than Scott Morrison and Anthony Albanese for the Australian politicians, there's something greater than the World Economic Forum. The world is losing sight of that fact. People everywhere are losing sight of that fact. Our leaders don't believe that fact. And so statism is what is going to happen unless we recover that fact afresh.